Is the Batman directed by Matt Reeves worth all the hype? Is it worth your time and money? Stay tuned to find out. Before I get into the meat of this review, I think it's important that I discuss the previous iterations of Batman so that you know where I'm coming from when I review this new film. I liked the Batman 1966, I thought it was quite a comedic film, and I liked the Tim Burton ones with their atmosphere. The Schumacher ones weren't really my type of movie. They were campy, but there was too much going on. And the Nolan film, I thought, were a nice reboot of the series. Wasn't a big fan of The Dark Knight Rises due to some changes to the antagonist and his role toward the end of the film. I wasn't a fan of Ben Affleck in Batman vs. Superman, although this film is an odd one out, as it's a crossover film, so I don't really generally compare it to the explicitly just Batman films. My favorite portrayal of Batman was actually in the animated series, as the writing by Paul Dini and the voice acting of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are how I envisioned Batman and the Joker. When The Dark Knight was first released, I was actually hoping that Nolan's next film would have the Riddler, because I could perfectly see him fitting in with a more realistic, gritty Batman film. So when the Batman was announced with Riddler as the villain, I was looking forward to it. When I heard that Matt Reeves was assigned as director for the Batman, I was a bit skeptical. I do think that Cloverfield and the Planet of the Apes movies are good popcorn flicks, as well as Let Me In, but I had trouble kind of envisioning what Batman would look like with him behind the helm. Now to discuss the newest film in the series, The Batman. When casting was announced, I did not have any problems with who they chose for which roles. I thought Robert Pattinson could potentially do a very good job as Bruce Wayne, having seen him in The Lighthouse and Good Time, and moving beyond his Twilight years. Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne was more of a brooding, isolated Bruce Wayne than we've seen in the past. This version of Bruce Wayne came off as more emotionally damaged. Previous iterations of Bruce Wayne were more of a billionaire playboy, and I think Robert Pattinson did a pretty good job with the material in this film. Zoe Kravitz was cast as Selina Kyle, although I was quite skeptical of Catwoman being in this film because of previous iterations of Catwoman's romantic interest for Bruce Wayne/Batman. However, I was pleasantly surprised, despite my qualms with maybe this character pulling the film in too many different directions. I thought that Zoe did a really good job as Catwoman, and it's probably the best iteration of Catwoman's outside of the animated series or the Arkham games. I thought Paul Dano could be a potentially good Riddler from his work that I've seen him in There Will Be Blood. Unlike prior antagonists in the Batman films, you don't see too much of the Riddler front and center because he's more playing a cat-and-mouse type game with Batman. But what we do see with Paul Dano, he does a very good job with the material, and I think he is a really good Riddler. I think the whole cast did a really great job. There was no one that I would say that would be miscast in a role. If I was to highlight a standout performance, it'd probably be Andy Serkis. I think he did an exceptional job. And I could see Andy Serkis as Alfred, as he's a man of many faces, and I think that he can fit into a variety of roles, as he's a very talented actor. I do think Jeffrey Wright did a pretty good job as Lieutenant Gordon, who's not quite a commissioner at this point, but I felt that Lieutenant Gordon was a bit aloof in this film, which is more of a problem with the writing. I felt he should have been a bit more competent. He is trustworthy and interacts with Batman. He does demonstrate some competency during the police station scene, but other than that, he seemed a bit aloof, and it's hard to imagine him going up to Commissioner, aside from literally hanging onto the coattails of Batman. So I would have liked to see a bit more competency from him in this film. But that's not an issue with Jeffrey Wright, that's more of the writing. His primary role was being a trustworthy individual within the police force, when the police force is primarily corrupt. How Gotham is portrayed is just as important as the cast, as the environment of Gotham very much contributes to Bruce Wayne as well as the villains. And I thought that Gotham was well represented within this film as a gritty, seedy underbelly of a place. So what did I think about the costume design? As the costume of Batman is also integral to how he's portrayed, I thought the costume in this didn't really deviate that much from the Nolan films. He has a batarang on his chest that can be taken out, which I thought was really neat. I'm glad that his suit doesn't have the Schumacher nipples that were on Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, although in hindsight that's mostly a comedic thing. When the mask for the Riddler was released, I was split on it. Many people, including myself, thought it looked a bit like the gimp suit from Pulp Fiction, And seeing it in action, I don't really like it, but I can see it fitting because of the serial killer type nature of this Riddler. Catwoman's costume wasn't as intricate as previous iterations of her, although it makes sense in this context as she doesn't appear to have much money in this film, and that's kind of a more realistic approach to her costume. I had no qualms with her costume design. I thought it was alright. In much the same way that James Bond is known for the gadgets in his film, Batman is also known for vehicles such as the Batwing and the Batmobile. The Batmobile in this film I thought was quite nice. It looked like a supercar, which makes sense in a more realistic film. It's not like the tank tumbler, which I had no problem with either. I do like the homage to more of the Tim Burton animated series Batmobile with the back, where the flame comes out of the back. While I did have some issues with the car chase in general, I don't have any issues with how the design was for this vehicle. Since we're on the top of the car chase, I might as well talk about the sound design. I thought the sound was pretty good throughout the most of the film. I'm sure that the issues that I have with sound might be just a localized issue with the theater that I was at, but during the car scene, it was extremely loud, and the Batmobile gives off this whiny hiss of a sound that I don't even have the best hearing, but I felt that it hurt my ears. I'm sure that was just localized to the theater that I was at, but it's worth mentioning as my experience. Otherwise, I felt that voices and gunshots were relatively well balanced. While I did like the music in the film for the most part, the Nirvana song Something in the Way, while being an absolutely great song, I felt it was overused being at the beginning and at the end and didn't really suit the tone in the places that it was put. I thought it fit the trailer very well, but I did not think it fit the movie very well. It's too ham-fisted at the places that it was placed. It works well for a trailer. I didn't think it worked well at the places in the movie. Overall, what did I think about the plot and the story beats? My girlfriend felt the pacing was too slow. I thought the pacing was okay, but I do wish there was more of the Riddler and less focus on the Mafia and the Penguin. While they weren't necessarily a bad addition to this film, I thought it could have been a tighter film if it did away with some plot elements. And focused more on the Riddler. I wanted to see more puzzles, more detective work. DC does stand for Detective Comics, and there's always been an element of detective work in Batman. Although I would have liked to see even more of it than what was presented in this film. Although, to be fair, there is more of it here than some previous iterations. I thought the riddles were mostly well implemented, although I would have appreciated some more guesswork from the audience before Batman interjects with the correct answer. It would have been nice to have this rather than have it spoon-fed to the audience. Although they were a bit too over the top, and not necessarily in a realistic solvability way. And as I touched upon earlier, I did not think that the romantic chemistry between Catwoman and Batman was very good. Batman doesn't tend to have the best romantic chemistry, as he's married to his job, essentially protecting the city, which is a common trope among superheroes. But with Batman and him being so stoic and quite brooding, I've never felt that romance kind of went very well with his films and serves as more of a distraction from the main plot. I did not think it was overbearing in this film, but I personally could have done without some of that, and it wouldn't have changed anything for me. A good Batman film. It's nothing groundbreaking, but if you like previous installments of Batman, especially the Nolan films, this feels like a very good continuation of that. However, if you did not like the previous iterations of Batman, I'd question why you'd even go to this film. While it might have some general likability of being just a decent thriller suspense film, if you don't really like Batman, then you would not really take to this film regardless. Although I am fatigued on superhero movies, I do tend to appreciate the Batman films when they're released, and I do appreciate from the Batman films the more concise narrative with no kind of element of trying to draw in an extended universe, at least in the standalone Batman films. I think that this does tend to benefit the writing and the pacing of the films, rather than trying to shoehorn in cameos. If you enjoyed my review of the Batman, please click the like button. If you want to see more movie reviews from me, you can click on the subscribe button and the bell notification button so that you'll be notified when I post new videos. Now that I've given my general thoughts on the film and whether it's recommended or not, I will be getting into spoilers. So you can stop the video at this point if you do not want to hear spoilers. Once the Riddler was captured and the seawalls were breached, leading to the confrontation with the fringe activists of the Riddler within Gotham Square Garden, I did not find that whole scene that captivating. At that point, the movie pretty much felt over to me. just tying up some loose ends, but these action scenes were kind of by the numbers. When Batman was hanging off a ledge, it was timed. You knew exactly when Catwoman would come in and save him, and vice versa, and it just became overly generic at that point. I actually would have much preferred if they got flooded, and we just kind of cut to the end there. Maybe show a few scenes of, with the flare and Batman leading people, but the whole confrontation at the end there, I thought it wasn't really needed, and at that point it was kind of anticlimactic. Well, there is the general theme of overcoming the sins of your father, as in Selina Kyle, Catwoman, and her father Falcone, the mob boss, as well as Batman, or Bruce Wayne, coming to terms with Thomas Wayne and his involvement with a journalist being murdered. However, I don't think it touched on this theme that great. While I do understand the purpose of Catwoman and her trying to help Batman infiltrate the Iceberg Lounge and get access to the Mafia crime bosses, I felt that her plotline was somewhat of a distraction, and I would have rather focused more on Bruce Wayne and the relationship with his father in general, rather than this distraction with Catwoman and her father being Falcone. In a dark humor kind of way, I did admittedly find it kind of funny when Villarreal, she insisted on giving her speech despite the police telling her that there would be an attempt on her life, which leads to her immediately getting shot at and then carried off stage. I understand the point of this character being a less corrupt mayor electorate, but I could be pretty much written out of the movie, and there'd be no changes to the movie whatsoever. I also felt that the scene with the Riddler at Arkham talking to the cellmate beside him just reeked of sequel bait. Although who knows whether the Joker will actually be in the sequel. It sounds like I have a lot of gripes with the film. I actually don't. I really enjoyed it. These are just some minor nitpicks or my opinion on certain scenes that I can't discuss outside of a spoiler section. This concludes my review of The Batman. Did you enjoy The Batman? What's your favorite Batman film? Please comment below and let me know.